Hey everyone, welcome to week 4 of our series on rest. Jesus says, come to me, let me teach you, and I will give you rest. So that's what we're going to talk about today. How is it that we come to Him so that He can teach us, that we can live in His way? So glad you're jumping in. We are jumping into week 4 of our series called Rest. And I don't know about you, but everybody I know, like COVID took it out of us. Right? Everybody reached in and just found a whole new level of tired over this last 18 months. And there's a way in which we just know God is inviting us into a whole different way coming out of that. That all the things that have been taken out of us and asked of us over 18 months don't just magically come back because we go on vacation for the first time in 18 months or we get really busy and crazy. If we sprint through this summer and come into August, we'll just be two kinds of tired. The tired from kind of navigating this whole last season, and then the tired from coming out of it and recoiling and rebounding out of everything. Instead, what we've been saying is, God, how might you point us forward in a different kind of way? How might you take this depletion that we've experienced and fill us up in the best kind of way? And the good news is, God's deeply interested in that. He has a way forward for that. He's inviting us into that all the time. And so we're 4 weeks into just following Jesus in the direction of refilling, replenishing, and launching us into all that He has in mind for us. If you're not a follower of Jesus, there is space for you here to watch, to look, to see, and just imagine what God has in mind for you. To sit alongside others who are following Jesus, who could tell you story on top of story of how God has shown up and provided rest and stepping into things. Each week we've been trying to challenge people with specific actions because the truth is, knowing is one thing, doing is another. So I hope that you're finding your way into some real practices as we go along. I want to invite you to take a picture of this screen right here real quickly. Every single week we look into what God has to say. Because any one of us, we're doing our best, but we're just people. We want to look at what Jesus has to say, and around here we say it like this. We want to join Jesus, and we want to do what He has to say. So over the next little bit, we're going to look into these 4 scriptures, but I'm just going to touch on each one of these. In each one of these, you'll see some different things about Jesus and relating to Him that will invite you into the kind of rest that God has in mind. So I encourage you, take a picture, write it down, type it, whatever you got to do to grab onto those. And at this website, you'll find some really simple questions for you, by yourself, or better yet, you with some family, friends, roommates, neighbors, to just look into what God has to say and say, how could we do what Jesus said? And find out if He knows what He's talking about. We've been doing all this from a key passage of Scripture. It's in Matthew chapter 11. It's that first one there. For the first week, we kind of pointed out the problem and said, hey, who's exhausted? It was Mother's Day, and everybody raised their hand, right? Because we have come through a tough season. For the last 2 weeks, we've basically illustrated what we're going to talk about this week. This week, we're going to zoom out and look over the whole idea of the way and the kind of rest that Jesus invites us to. And the last 2 weeks were just illustrations or examples. The first week, we're having a rhythm of taking a day off so your work doesn't become your identity. You don't exhaust yourself and get fried. God invites us to 24 hours of rest called a Sabbath each week. And it's a great habit and practice. Hopefully, you're trying it and you're already finding out. Last week, we talked about forgiveness. Another example of what we're going to talk about, how Jesus points us toward rest when we live His way, right? That when we lay down burdens and don't allow them to become bitter, when we actually embrace and pray for and find our way through the hurts that we've picked up along the way, Jesus brings us rest. This week, we're going to zoom out and talk about how not just in those 2 ways, but in all facets of life, if we'll follow Jesus' way, He promises rest. What I'm not gonna do this week is tell you the brass tacks of how. That's next week, and I'm excited for the whole crew of people who are gonna teach next week. It's gonna be great, you don't wanna miss it. But if you're looking for specific ideas, ways to try it, practices, you're like, okay, I get it, how do I do it? Next week, we're gonna lean in. This week is mostly about the why. And we're gonna start in Matthew chapter 11. It sounds like this in verse 28. Jesus says this to everyone, whether you're a follower of Him or not, He invites you to this. Jesus says, come to me, come to me, come to me. It's a very personal invitation. Not come to an ideology, not come to all the right thinking, not come to all the right beliefs or right stances. He says, no, come to me, the person of Jesus. All of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens. By the way, that's the only kind of person I know. So I don't know who you know, but all the people I know, that fits. That invitation's to everybody. And He says, He promises, I will give you rest. Not I'll point you toward it, not I'll tell you where to find it. I will give it to you, Jesus says. Such a personal invitation. He goes on and he says, take my yoke upon you. Now, we'll talk about what this whole yoke idea means, but you can call it to mind a couple of animals pulling a cart, hooked together by this thing called a yoke. We'll get to it in a bit. But to be more specific, he says, let me teach you. Let me teach you. Not let everybody else teach you. Not go to Facebook and find the best idea. Not 5 ways to a more restful life on Reddit or anything else. But not just looking at your parents and saying, well, they totally screwed it up, so I'll try it this way. Not that. No. He says, let me teach you. Let me point you the best way possible because I'm gentle and I'm humble at heart. And you will, he says, you'll find rest. Not just rest for your body, not just rest for your mind, not just rest for your relationships, which takes so much because people are people. Find rest for your souls. Like rest that goes all the way deep. In the Bible, this idea of soul has to do with like the truest, purest sense of who you are and were created to be. You know that part of you that in your deepest relationships, they see you all the way and you're like, oh, it is good to be known and accepted. If we don't have that, all of us long for it. Like this rest goes all the way through, he promises. And he says, my yoke is easy to bear. And the burden I give you is light. I want to focus on something really quick in this verse that in the midst of this idea of rest, we've talked about how you got to create some space, and Sabbath is one way to do that. And you got to lay some things down that are wearing you out that you were never asked to carry. That was last week in forgiveness. But in the midst of rest, it's not just the absence of work. It's not just the setting down of things. It's also in the taking up of things. Do you see? He says, let me teach you. Jesus has something to give us that replenishes and refuels us. It's not just the absence of the things that deplete us that we need. It's the replacement of the things that actually fill us up. Call to mind the last night you slept really, really well. Parents, go decades if you need to. When's the last time you went to bed totally exhausted? Like you couldn't go another step. You fell down and you were like asleep before your head hit the pillow. But then the next day, somehow, you woke up with capacity to go again, right? Or think about the last time you were like brutally hangry and everyone needed to get out of your way. You remember this, right? If you don't remember, just ask the person you came along with. They remember. But then somehow in a good meal on the other side, you had a different kind of capacity because something had been replenished, replaced. You all with me? This is what Jesus invites us to. And he says, don't go somewhere else for this. Come to me. So Jesus says, come to me, come to me, come to me. And he doesn't say it in such a way that this is like a one-time stop-off, quick trip refill. No. This is like, come to me over and over and over. Keep coming back to me. He says it in a unique way in John chapter 15. This is the night before he was betrayed, sitting with his closest friends saying, guys, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna go. And I've been a source of strength for you, and I'm still going to be. So this is so important, guys. Don't run away. He says, remain. Remain in me. Stay with me. Dwell with me. The word actually has its roots in the idea of a house or a home. He says it this way in John 15. He says, remain in me. And here's the promise. In case you thought this wasn't a personal invitation, he says, remain in me, and I will remain in you. All the best relationships are reciprocal, right? It's never one way. It's never just one person giving. It's reciprocal. This is personal, Jesus is saying. Not a set of ideas, not a certain gatherings, not just practices. A person, Jesus saying, remain in me, and I'll remain in you. He says, for a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. This is so simple. All right, even us desert dwellers know that if you cut a limb off of something, it's dying from the moment it's cut, right? It maintains its shape for just a little while, even its color for a little while. Even when it's done shrinking and shriveling, it looks a shell of what it once was. I'm just wondering if this is an image of the last 18 months for a few people. If we're really gonna replenish and come alive, we've gotta stay connected. Jesus says that will not happen. I have things. A living branch receives things from the roots that it cannot receive unless it's connected. Right? He says, remain in me. He says, yes, I'm the vine and you are the branches. In case you thought you were the source, Jesus says, nope, that's me. and you're the branches, but I'll fill you. I have things for you. I have things you need to flourish and thrive. And he says, those who do remain in me and I in them, they will produce much fruit. He says, for apart from me, you can do a little bit. Apart from me, you can do just enough. Apart from me, you can get by. No, he says, apart from me, you can do what? Nothing. Nothing. But there's this invitation. If you'll remain, you not might bear fruit. You not might live a fruitful, meaningful, impactful, purposeful life. You will stay connected to me. He says, come to me, come to me, come to me, come to me. Right? We know what it is. Followers of Jesus, can I just get like a head nod that when you have remained connected to Jesus, life was more fruitful and meaningful? Can I just get a head nod? Yeah, right? And there are things that you receive in connection to him that can't be found anywhere else. Can I get that head nod? There's a source of strength in remaining with him, staying with him. Like I said, this word literally means home. Call to mind the last season of your life, whenever it was, when you had the greatest sense of home. Maybe you just moved here and you haven't found that here yet. I was just talking to a friend who moved here like a little over a year ago and feels like her heart just arrived here. Right? It takes a while for a place to become home. But call to mind a place for home. It's the place you return to, right? It's the place you're most you. It's the place you you venture away sometimes, but you always come back. You always let down. You look forward to getting back there, right? It's the place that you refuel, replenish. Jesus is saying, could you just let me be that for you? Come to me. Remain in me over and over and over. Never lose connection. Because he says, if we'll do that, then he'll remain in us. And he actually provides that fuel, that replenishment, that restoring all of the reserves that we have tapped and drained over the last 18 months. He says, I have something for you. I want to give this to you, but you got to stay connected to me. I sat down with like 4 other people and looked through some of these passages together. And one of my statements at the end, we always want to obey what Jesus said, not just hear what Jesus said. So one of my statements to obey it is, okay, I am going to look over the last 1 month and see what are the things that God has given me that I know came from him and never would have come without him. And so I started writing these things down. It took me less than 15 minutes, and the good news is I get distracted, so I write stuff down. I had something to look over. And so this is a page out of my journal that you can't read, but I'll tell you about it some other time if you want. It's just not that important right now. What I want to show you, though, is, boom, 7 life redirecting moments with Jesus in the last 30 days. That when we remain with him, he gives us something we won't find somewhere else. My favorite thing lately is he's got me drawing pictures. And so this right here is this tiny little Pooh Bear size honey pot. This is my resource of strength. That's how big my capacity is when I just go to my skill set, my charisma, my ability, my experiences, all the things that I can muster up on my own. And this giant thing right here is like the very tip corner of what God is capable of. And God's been teaching me, Drew, you are fishing in the wrong barrel. You are looking in the wrong place for strength. And this number 1 thing has everything to do with a reliance on him to accomplish something that I had strained and struggled so long to accomplish. And then in the waiting on him, just watched him do it, almost effortlessly. Listen, there's something in remaining connected, in dwelling, holding space with God, that he does stuff that can't happen any other way. So let me ask you, how are you doing at this? We've given you a couple ways the last couple weeks, but over the course of your life recently, how are you doing at remaining with Jesus? Those of you who are stepping in for the first time, the invitation is wide open and there's no shame for where you're at. Beginning where you are is perfect. But for many of us who've been journeying with Jesus, how's that going? You have a list of 7 or 8 things, at least in the last month, that God has said, boom, 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 let's reorient, let's redirect. I'm with you, I have something for you, right? Those of us who have the answer yes, yeah, we just want to keep going. Some people are like, listen, I got practices for days, but they've kind of grown stale. Maybe it's time to revisit how often and how present we are with Jesus. Rhythms help us. And so let me just ask, do you have a daily rhythm with God? Do you hold space with God every day? What about weekly? Do you have a good weekly rhythm? Are there any rhythms that you could introduce once a week that would help hold and create some space, or monthly or annually? By way of illustration, we try to do this with our family because one of our prayers for our kids is that they would never ever know a moment of their life without God's presence. But that doesn't happen on accident. You don't stumble into that. We need to practice God's presence, to borrow a phrase from this epic author, Brother Lawrence. We need to practice his presence. And so we're trying to teach them that. Now, in our house, we got 4 kids ranging from 9 to 14, which means we get about 1.2 billion questions a day. To try to limit that number of questions, my amazing wife put together this list that we try to practice every day. We want our kids to develop mentally, relationally, creatively, all those things. So every day there's music time, there's school, read and write time, even in the summer. I know, we're the worst. Reading time, exercise, we want to develop physically. We want family responsibility to be important because you contribute, you don't just consume. You even have extra help because we go above and beyond. But look how it starts. Read something that helps me connect with God, write a prayer, copy a Bible verse. So that hopefully on a daily rhythm, we're creating and holding space. Even if it's just a couple minutes, even if it's not life-altering every single time, we just want to hold space with Jesus. We want to come to him, come to him, come to him. We want to teach our kids how to do that too. Weekly, we try to practice the Sabbath, both as a family, and mine's different because I work weekends, and that's just how it is, but we practice that 24-hour period of enjoying one another, enjoying God, and disconnecting from productivity. Trusting the God who made the universe to actually run it without me for a day. You know, that kind of thing? We try to do that. We also participate in a weekly gathering of church. Our kids serve alongside children's ministry, and it's watching their hearts be poured into others in meaningful ways. It's been so good. Do you have some rhythms? Right? It'll change in each season, but do you have some weekly rhythms, monthly rhythms, annual, once a year infusions, like potent deposits of like connecting with God? Forever with kids, this has been a priority, both when I was a student, as a student pastor, and now as leading our family. We prioritize annually as best we can our kids to be at a camp every single year. There's something about setting aside a series of days to create particular space for God. So if you are a part of a family that has an elementary student, a middle school student, all the way through high school graduates, we do camps here. They're not the only ones, there's great ones, but we do ones that are awesome here, helping students connect with one another, connect with God. In fact, if we sat down over lunch, I could tell you 5, 6 stories easily, without even thinking about it, of moments where God met me in these kind of experiences, where you set aside particular time. I want to encourage you, prioritize it this summer. You can scan the QR code, you'll see all the dates, you'll see the age ranges, everything that you need. The beauty of COVID is we're local, which means things are super affordable. So jump in. If you're a family, you got 5 more seconds before I stop stalling for you to do this. You got it? Everybody got it? Great. Jesus says if you really want rest, if you want to be refilled, come to me. Come to me. Come to me. And then he says, take my yoke. Let me teach you. Now, what this means really is that he has things for us to receive. I thought maybe what would be most helpful right out of the gate in terms of teaching would be an example of this. So if you have your Bible, go to Luke chapter 10. I sat down with 4 friends and looked through this earlier, and the things that we discovered and emerged from this with those questions that we're always pointing you to were so helpful. In Luke chapter 10, we get this picture of Jesus swinging by somebody's house. Luke 10:38, it says this: as Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into their home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he taught. That's a cool picture, hold on to it. But Martha was distracted by the big dinner that she was preparing. She came to Jesus and she said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. But the Lord said to her, my dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. Do you ever, I don't know what your habit of looking through the Bible is, and with one of my kids, we're reading through the book of Mark, and each story you hear about Jesus reveals something about his character and the way that we relate to him. But not everything that could be said about Jesus is in the Bible. They had to pick and choose. In fact, one of Jesus' friends, John, wrote this literally. He said, if I wrote down everything that Jesus did, it would fill all the volumes across the whole world. There's no way to do it. So my question is, why did Luke, the writer of what I just read, who interviewed all kinds of people in Jesus' life to put together the most important vital stories to help us know him, why did he choose this one? Hey, Jesus went and had dinner at these people's house and the girls got in a fight. I mean, for real, there's gotta be no accidents. There's something so key and revealing in this story. Maybe you've already seen it. Mary discovered something that her sister missed. In the culture in which they lived, hospitality is so highly valued. In the Middle East, big deal. First century Middle East, big deal. Hospitality in an honor and shame culture. To fail to be hospitable or to be clumsy in hospitality brings shame on your family and dishonor and lowers and pulls their status in the community into question. And it was not isolated households, it was interwoven community. If you botched hospitality, there were massive consequences in the midst of this culture. And so Martha takes the initiative and she says, hey, Jesus, bring all you and your entourage, come to dinner. And she immediately goes to work, like setting all of this stuff up. But in the midst of that, we see Mary, her sister, go totally countercultural. In so many ways, she stumbled on something that would supersede even such a high cultural value to find her sitting at Jesus' feet, which it says something about her priorities. Not that she was diminishing or holding up this lifelong cultural value, but that she found something that superseded even that. To break and risk cultural norms. Listen, it was fine for learners to sit at a rabbi's feet as long as they were men. But we find Mary holding space with Jesus and Jesus making space for a woman to learn in exactly the same way as men. To be not kind of a disciple, a learner, one being shaped by a teacher. It didn't meet others' expectations, and you and I both know. Listen, just decide right now, which are you, Mary or Martha? If you don't know, ask the person you came with. Are you the one prone to sit and be relational or the one doing tasks, hustle and bustling? Just ask a Martha. There's no way, listen, this is not in the Bible, but in my imagination, this is how it went. Martha comes out round one and like, really, Mary? Really? And Mary's not making eye contact. She's got no room for that noise, right? And so Martha's like slamming plates. The kitchen is just bustling right and left, like all kinds of noise, like passive aggressive right and left. Until Martha, actually, this is accurate, in the culture, to risk approaching a rabbi with this kind of issue showed such high trust and relationship with her. Listen, it was not unclear that how Martha felt. But she did, and then a friend pointed this out as we were discovering this together. She just said, look, Martha still went to Jesus too. She just went with her concern. Mary sat and learned, found her way into such a transformative relationship with God. And it was so personal. Not alone, she was with others, but so personal. This is what we want to find our way into. Followers of Jesus, sometimes we do things to try to connect with God that become more about the things than connecting with God. Getting it done, checking it off, staying on schedule, all the practices along the way, they become stale and we lose sight of the whole point. The mode of transportation becomes more important than the destination. It'd be like sitting down to an epic Michelin star meal and leaving it on the plate saying, wow, this is such a cool fork. We don't settle for the means. It's the relationship that Jesus invites us to. It's not a set of practice, it's so personal. Mary sitting at his feet, interacting, and Jesus not condemning of Martha, but so like brokenhearted for her settling for distraction and hustle and bustle and obligation and checklists and cultural expectations. When she comes with her complaint, Jesus said, listen, dear Martha, you're distracted. You're missing it. There's great and you're settling for good. You see, both Mary and Martha responded to Jesus, right? Martha, in her distraction, did not. I don't know if you're naturally more like Mary, relational, we could say, or more like Martha, task-oriented. I'm task-oriented. I'm the one who answers all the questions in the email and then backs up and remembers to be friendly. You know what I'm saying? I'm that much of a task person at times. Whatever your natural wiring is, what is your approach to Jesus these days? Are you holding space like Mary sitting relationally face to face? Are you accepting that Very personal invitation, come to me, come to me, come to me. My guess is a lot of us, despite our natural wiring, probably relate more to Martha. We are distracted and worrying about lots of details. Well, after this, once I answer this alert, once I scroll through these 5 apps, once I do this, once I get to this, I'll get to that, and we never get to it. I wonder if the invitation for a lot of us out of this passage, especially in coming and letting Jesus teach us, comes in the words of Dallas Willard when he said, ruthlessly eliminate hurry. When Kevin taught about the Sabbath a couple weeks ago, he said, what would a day look like without hurry? And that just landed on me. Ruthlessly eliminate hurry. Why? You can do a devotion in a hurry. You can read a passage of scripture in a hurry. You can do lots of Christian things in a hurry. You know what you can't do in a hurry? Relationships. You know what else you can't do in a hurry? Rest. Oh man, I've only got 15 minutes. I got to lay down and fall asleep right away or I'm not going to get 14 minutes of sleep. That doesn't work. All right, you know what? Let's do a date night. I'm just so interested in you, and I want to discover new things about you. Let's relate and connect, and is there any way we could do that in the next 2.5 minutes? You just can't do those things that ruthlessly eliminate hurry. In fact, this phrase came about when a young leader named John Ortberg approached his mentor, Dallas Willard, to ask him. John was about to enter a huge season of responsibility at a massive church in the Midwest. And so he goes to his mentor and says, I want to do this well. And so he asks, what do I need to do to be spiritually healthy? And so after an annoyingly long pause, Dallas said, you must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. And so John wrote it down really, really quick so he didn't miss it. And then he looked up, like, what's the next thing, right? He looks at it and goes, that's a good one. Now what else? And Dallas looked at him and said, there's nothing else. I'm just not sure Jesus is that interested in you accessing new information. He's interested in relationship. You can't microwave that. You can't rush that. You can't Google that. It doesn't happen. He's interested in bringing rest. And it's just not going to happen in a hurry. If we really want to live well with God, if we want this to be more than just some empty religious practice, if we really want to accept the invitation Jesus says of come to me in a personal, relational way, we have to ruthlessly eliminate hurry. And when we get there, he invites us to learn, which also doesn't happen in a hurry. It does if you're just trying to accomplish Common Core, although less fast than it used to be. Not just for a standardized test or to pass an exam or get a certification. No. The kind of learning Jesus invites us to is by use and by practice, something becomes habit. That we do it over and over and over until it becomes natural. You can't microwave that. Things don't become habit and second nature quickly, right? Like I could tell you right now, I can do 6 different things while finding my way to the cabinet that holds the bowls for ice cream. You know why? I've been there 100 times. I could answer a question from my wife, text my friend, correct my kids, and clean up half the kitchen on the way to the cabinet without thought because I've done it so many times. Right? By use and by practice, things become habit. In fact, we know we're becoming like Jesus, Dallas Willard says, when we effortlessly do what Jesus would do if he were in our place. That doesn't happen accidentally, and it doesn't happen coming to Jesus once. It happens when we set our home and receive over and over and over all that Jesus has offered us. One more note about this idea of taking on Jesus' yoke. I said earlier, it's this way that you connect with another to pull things forward, and just so you know, Jesus always does the heavy lifting. But when Jesus says that the yoke is easy and his burden is light, he does not mean effortless, accidental, or passive. What it actually means is perfectly fitting, appropriately adjusted for effectiveness, meaningfulness, and development. You see the difference, right? Maybe an illustration that humiliates me will help. I went over to a buddy's house who's totally into CrossFit. Anybody into CrossFit? Just kidding, you need to raise your hands. You already told us. And I'm just kidding. Low blow for the CrossFit. Anyway, my buddy, I really do appreciate him, and he's super into it. And he was like, okay, we're going to do these things called overhead squats. I'm like, I hate the sound of both of those things. And he showed me where you lift the bar over your head, and then you do like a full squat. And I was like, okay, no problem. He says, why don't you just try it with the bar? I'm like, I could do more with the bar. Come on, man, this is 45 pounds. Get real. And so he's like, no, just trust me. Put it over your head. And so I put it over my head, and I nearly fell over because my shoulders just don't bend the right way to be able to do that movement. So he loads up the bar with like 45s on each side. It was 135 pounds, and he puts it over his head and squats it 5 times or whatever. And I was like, dude, and he's like, oh, that's not for you. And he looks at me, and in like this Mr. Miyagi moment, he hands me a 5-pound weight plate. I'm like, dude, don't put me at the kids' table, right? Like, seriously. He goes, no, man, it's not about effort, it's not about strength. You don't have the mobility in your shoulder. And so the best thing you can do right now is put that 5-pound plate over your head and squat 5 times. And so for the next 25 minutes, while he's squatting 135 pounds over his head, I got my little dinner plate going up and down, shame, like just utter humility, and then we go run and then come back and do it again. But here's the thing. It's what I need now. It's appropriate development for now. It doesn't matter if it's 5 or 135, it's what's next. And here's the beauty of walking with Jesus. He always has a next in mind. It always fits. It's deeply personal, it's just for you, and you walk forward with him. So when he says, take my yoke upon you, he's not saying, go figure it out on your own. He's saying, walk with me, walk with me, walk with me, come to me, come to me, come to me, all of you. I'll give you rest. Let me teach you over and over and over all the time. Because as you find your way in my direction, you will find rest for your souls. You'll find forgiveness is way better than bitterness. You'll find 6 days a week of work keeps it right in its place, and some real rich rest, joy, memories, and connections with others happen on that 7th day, and any number of other teachings along the way that we find as he shapes us, as we take his yoke upon us. He promises, he doesn't say maybe, he says you will find rest for your souls, a different kind of capacity, a constant kind of receiving and replenishing that can't happen any other way. This is a promise we should hold on to, and you only find it into action if you put it into practice. Because while information is helpful, experiences teach you things that information could never teach you. And so Jesus says, come to me, make a home. Let me teach you, you'll find rest. Come to me. Come to me. Come to me. Stop going everywhere else. Come to me. Come to me. Yeah, come to me alongside other people. Come to me in the Word. Come to me in the church. Come to me all the places you can find me. Come to me, but make a home and stay. Remain, remain, remain. Never leave. Always come back. He says, let me teach you. Let me shape you by use and by practice to develop a habit. And what you will find is a rest, a different kind of pace and steadiness for your souls. But you only find it if you what? Put it into practice. You got to let him teach you. You got to take his yoke. You got to come to him. But when you hold space like Mary sitting at his feet, you'll receive what you need to move forward and walk with a different kind of pace, a reorienting kind of list that points you into a way more sustainable, fruitful John 15 kind of life. He has this in mind. It's an invitation for every single one of us. The question is whether you'll say yes and create the space. Daily space, weekly space, monthly space, annual space. So why don't you decide right now? Yes or no? You gonna make space? Do you wanna get well? We started that at the beginning of the series. What do you want? Jesus says, I'll give you rest, but you gotta come to me. Come to me. Let me be more specific, so hopefully you've said yes or no. How this week are you gonna create a different kind of space than you've ever created before to hold space with Jesus? What is the next step he is inviting you to? To take your 5-pound weight plate and let's try 10. What's a new way to hold a different kind of space so that you can receive? Listen, we have depleted at a rate that is higher than maybe any other season of life for many of us. We need to replenish in a different way than in previous seasons. What got us here won't get us there. He's got to fill us back up. And so the question is, what kind of space will you hold? What will you do today? What will you do tomorrow? Decide, make a choice. Let's begin together. In case anyone needed to know, it's 12:31. All you Marthas, you already knew. You got things to do. You got places to be. You pride yourself on being first out the parking lot. I know you. How ruthlessly are you willing to eliminate hurry? Would you show up 10 minutes to whatever's next, 10 minutes late to whatever's next? Worst case scenario, they ask you why. And you say, let me tell you about these two ladies Jesus had dinner with. One of them sounds great, and I sound like the other one. Settle yourself. Ruthlessly eliminate hurry. Stop rushing. Take some space to decide how you're going to practice this. I'll give you a couple minutes to read through a prayer that might help you invite God and respond to God to hold space with him. It's from Psalm number 27. It's great to pray the scriptures. Sometimes I don't know what to say to God, and the scripture helps me know what to say to God, so I'll pray Psalms. And Psalm 27 is strong and helpful today. Several of these passages are going to show up on the screen. You can just read through those, preferably out loud, to keep your focus. And honestly, once you've read them, internalized them, say, God, that's my prayer. That's what I want. Yeah. Yes, God, let's do that. Begin to hold space and decide how you're going to do that. And then we're going to sing one more song. I know it's going to stretch your timeline today, Martha. Make space. You can do it. I believe in you. I believe more in him. Make some space. Let's invite God. Let's remain. Let's remain with him. Begin practicing that now and carry that practice in a fresh way into this week. Because Jesus says, if you come to me, all of you, any of you, everyone who's weary and carries heavy burdens, you will find rest. Let's begin now. So there it is. We come to him, we let him teach us, and he gives us rest. When we live into his way, but it only comes alive, it only works when we put it into practice, when we really meet with Jesus. So pick a habit, lean in, try it out this week. Check us out on social media. You'll find some other helpful videos and ideas along the way to create some fresh space to meet with God and watch as he fills us all up. We're so glad to be with you today.